the Torah portion. We are in Mishpatim. Okay, we're in the fourth reading. Chapter 22 in the book of Shmois, Exodus, verse 27. Everybody have the place? Good. Okay, let's share over here. Verse 27. Elokim lo yisekalel. You shall not curse. Kala means to curse. Elokim here refers to judges. As we've had it before, the word Elokim, God's name. Judges are God's representatives in adjudicating law. That's a term used for judge. And a leader amongst the Jewish people, you shall not curse. Okay, Rashi in 27. So Rashi says, Rezu Hazara the Birchas Hashem. This is a prohibition against cursing the name of God, Hazara lekal dayan, and a prohibition against cursing a judge. So Rashi says it's two things. Interesting. By the way, it says Birchas Hashem, right? It's a euphemism, obviously, because it means in cursing of God, but it's saying to bless God in His name, right?
Okay.
That's what Rashi is saying. Huh? No, well, yeah, but that's not a euphemism. This is a euphemism.
Yeah, it's like a tongue in cheek.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that implies both meanings, right? Because Elokim does refer to God, but Elokim, the simple meaning of it refers to God, right? The non-simple meaning is it refers to judges of a court. So Rashi says it's both. Okay. So mi'alascha means the fullness, and v'dim acha is in reference to truma. Loisa acher, you should not delay. B'chor banecha titen li, your firstborn sons you should give to me. Rashi 28. What's this talking about over here? The fullness of an offering. This is an obligation that is imposed upon you. When your produce becomes ripened, this is called bikurim, which is the first fruits. That's what this is. Rashi says this reference is. Which we'll have more about that in Deuteronomy. In Parshas Kisavai. V'dimcha, and your dimcha, this refers to truma. V'eni yodea ma loshen adima. And Rashi said, I don't know what the language, why the term dima is over here, but he says it means truma. So if he doesn't know what it means, why would he say that it means truma then? Okay. Truma is the 2% that you give to the kohen from your produce. Okay? That's truma. Meiser is the 10% that you give to the Levi.
Okay.
Right? Different, right? From the tithing of your crops that you give. But the truma is referring to, truma if it's of a field. I don't even know if that's what it's.
The 2% is given to who?
The kohen. Remember, the kohen and the Levites don't have a share of the land, and they do the service, and in the temple, so therefore they get from people, like they're doing on their behalf, so people give them, because they're not tilling the soil, they don't have land to produce, so they're given those things in exchange, they're their gifts. Loisa Achar, don't delay. Loisa Shannon say the Frashosam. So Rashi says, don't change the order of their separation. La'achas muktam, to delaying that which comes first. La'achtim zamuchar, and to advance that which comes later. What does that mean? Shalayaktim truma lebikurim. You should not give truma before bikurim. Right, the 2% to the kohen should not be before the bikurim, which is what you bring from the first fruits to Jerusalem. That's the first thing you need to do. That's what it means not to delay, meaning delay the order. Meiser letruma. Also, now he continues, Meiser before truma. You give the 2% to the kohen and then the 10% to the Levite. That's the order. Okay. The firstborn of your sons you should give to me. You should redeem him with 10 coins, 10 silver coins from the kohen. Why is this mitzvah mentioned over here? Haloi kvar tziva Allah b'mokum acher. We've already been commanded this. Already been commanded. He brings down the note over here in Bamidbar in Numbers. No, but we were already commanded this in Parshas Boy, right? When before they went out, already had about the firstborn that belongs to God. So, okay. So why is it here? In order to juxtapose it with the following verse, so you should do for your ox and for your flocks, to teach you, ma bechor adam, just as you redeem the firstborn child after 30 days, Shenemar, as the verse clearly says later on, that you redeem after 30 days. Likewise, the firstborn small cattle, you have to take care of them for 30 days, and then you have to give it to the kohen. That's going to be the next verse, right? Let's see. So, in other words, the fact that the firstborn is given to God, that's not telling us anything. We know that. So why is it telling us? So Rashi is saying it's juxtaposed for the next verse to tell us that there's a comparison to be made. Just like the firstborn of your cattle, it doesn't say when you have to give it to the kohen, but you have to give it to the kohen. It doesn't say when. The fact that they're juxtaposed to each other is to tell us, just like by the firstborn child, it says clearly 30 days. So likewise, it's 30 days that you have to take care of the animal and then give to the kohen. Okay? You see the verse says, and so you shall do, l'shorcha, l'tzaynecha, to your ox, to your sheep, shivas yamim imimai, it'll be 7 days with his mother, and on the 8th day you shall give him to me. That's interesting. Let's see Rashi, because that seemed, here it's saying on the 8th day, right? And Rashi just said 30 days. We'll see. Let's see Rashi.
Amen.
Oops. I didn't go further. Sorry. Okay. So 29. Shivas yamim imimai. For 7 days he shall be. In other words, this little animal, right, shall be with the mother. This is actually a prohibition for the kohen. That if he comes to hasten his sacrifice, he should not come. He should not come before the 8th day, because it's lacking the appropriate time, the required time. So, yeah, so the Kohen cannot demand to have what's his before the eighth day. From eighth day he could, but he could ask the Israelite to take care of it until the 30th day, right? He has the permission to have it from the eighth day, but he could ask that that the Israelites should take care of it until the 30th day. Okay. But before 8 days, he can't. Yeah, the seventh and the eighth day was a present given to me. So one might think that it's an obligation on the eighth day, right? To take the bull or the sheep on that day. But nope, that will be refuted. Why? Because here it says 8 day, and further on it also says that on the eighth day and onward it shall be accepted. Mashmini. That's later on in Leviticus. We're speaking about the minimum of 8 days for an animal offering, right? Now that you can't offer an animal before 8 days, right? That's what it says later. So, so what does it mean, the 8th day? It only means to validate that from that day onwards, you could bring the animal as a sacrifice. Likewise, over here, when we say the 8th day, it only means to validate that the firstborn for a sacrifice can be from the 8th day onward, but not that it's an obligation on the 8th day. Right? From the verse, you might think that it's otherwise. Likewise, the inference over here, on the 8th day, you're permitted to give it to me. Yeah, okay, is that clear? Okay. But in other words, you could take it from that point on, but you could also, you have until 30 days. Now you could ask the Israelite to hold on to it for you. And the reason why you do that, because the first 30 days are going to be the most difficult in, when you got to raise that animal, it's, more of a challenge for the kohen. Yeah, it's easier because when he comes, he's coming to your farm, right? So he's going to have to take that, probably carry it. Maybe not carry it, but it'll be a challenge for him. It's not strong enough to make the journey on the 8th day, right? We're talking about it's a farm, it's maybe several miles away from his place or from Jerusalem, so it's a difficult thing. 30 days, then the animal is stronger.
I thought the people brought it to the temple.
Firstborn. We're not. We're talking about a firstborn. It belongs to the kohen.
It belongs to the Kohen. So the Kohen goes to get it.
Yeah.
Oh, he goes to get it. I didn't know.
I mean, yeah, Well, we didn't learn that here, but yeah, the person's isn't obligated to bring it to him. Like also the truma, the kohen is going and getting it. The owner of the farm isn't obligated to bring it to him. Okay. Verse 30. But that we didn't learn that here. I don't remember where that is learned out, but it's learned out somewhere. Verse number 30. Anshe Kodesh Tiyunli, people of holiness you should be to me. Basar basad, and meat in the field, treifa, is treif. Right? Treif. Means it was a mauled animal, right? Remember, folks, besides slaughtering an animal for kosher, every animal has a violent death. It's to get mauled by another animal. It gets killed by another animal, right? That's what happens. That's the law of the of the jungle, if you will, right? So that's what it means, treifa. It got mold. You can't eat that. Loy seichelu. You cannot eat it. Lekelev tashlichin oisei. You can throw it to a dog, which means you can have benefit from it, as we will learn tomorrow from an. No, actually, we learned it last week in Parshas Yisrael that mixing milk and meat, you can't have benefit from it. But from a mold animal, in other words, let's say it wasn't slaughtered properly, or we found an animal just died in the field, you can have benefit from it. Rashi in number 30, you are holy people unto me. If you are holy and abstain from the carcass of unslaughtered animals and animals that have been mauled, then you're mine. If not, you're not mine. Wow. In other words, if you act this way, you're mine. There's something very special about keeping kosher. And flesh in the field that is torn. Even if this was in the house, it's also, if it was a mauled animal, right? It's also so. So why does the verse speak this way? Because it's speaking in normal terms, right? You're not going to get a mauled animal in your house. It's going to be more likely in the field. The place where it's normally mauled an animal. Likewise, and he found her in the field. This is later on in Deuteronomy, when a man rapes a woman, and it says he found her in the field. Found her in the field. Similarly, if a person had a nocturnal emission, meaning at nighttime, so it's the same is true if it was by day, right? And likewise, raped her in the field. Why is it speaking about that? Because it means it's speaking in a normal way. Normal way is meaning in a field, meaning away from people, right? And likewise, when it's speaking about an emission of semen, it's usually going to be by night. The Onkelos explains the end of the verse. Flesh has been torn away through the tearing of a lion or a wolf or a lion, from a kosher species of a beast or a kosher species of an animal, while it is alive. According to Onkelos, Rashi learns that the animal died. According to Onkelos, no, it's still alive, but it was mauled by an animal, and therefore it's got an injury. So therefore, because it has an injury, means it's not a healthy. It's not a healthy animal, and will not live. I mean, in halacha, it won't live for 12 months, and therefore you're not allowed to eat it. That's how he's.
Can a Jew eat an injured animal?
That's what we just said.
Yeah, but mauled, it depends what we mean by that. Like, let's say it has a broken leg.
So here it doesn't. Here he's not explaining it, but the halacha is, and without going into details, if the animal will not survive for 12 months, and it's called a treifa, this term over here, it's called a mauled animal, right? And therefore you're not allowed to eat it. So, for example, when you check a bull or a cow, you check its lungs, and if you see certain things in the lungs, that there were lesions on the lungs because they're recovering some kind of hole in the lung, so it's not kosher. Okay, but not here. Let's go. The cow that's actually no, so you throw it to the dog.
Rabbi, can you scroll up, please?
Oh, thank you. Going to kill. Or does it mean, right? What does it mean over here? Talmud Leimer, the Avela by Karkas, it says, Oymachar lenochri, or sell it to a non-Jew, so you can for sure then permitted to derive benefit from a torn animal. Im kein Talmud Leimer lekelev. So why is it the lamed should the kelev nichbad mimenu she'akasav kodesh baruch hu compared to birya, because he is a creature that you shouldn't take away its reward. L'chol b'nei Yisrael lo yechretz kelev. As when the Jewish people, the animals didn't sharpen their tongues and it didn't cause them problem when they were leaving Egypt. So therefore the Torah says, come give its reward. The non-Jews were cruel to the Jews, so therefore the verse isn't saying give it to the non-Jew, it says give it to the animal. Right? Because they were actually good. That's what Rashi is saying.
So the animals were better than the Jews than the Egyptians.
They in Egypt, right? All the Egyptians were, there wasn't a good Egyptian, right? There wasn't a compassionate Egyptian. There were those who cared for themselves, and therefore when they got plagued, so therefore they said, get them out of here. But there was no one who had compassion, right? The dogs did. So therefore give it to the dogs. Right? That's what it means. Chapter 23, verse 1.
But just by the way, it's interesting because I noticed this when the last time we were reading Devarim, that there's a similar verse in Deuteronomy.
Oh, that's what we brought down, Nevela. Yeah. That's what he said, same idea. Yeah, exactly.
That's how
Yep.
the connection.
Okay. Chapter 23, verse 1. Lo yisisa shema shav. So you should not bear a sisha shav, a report, a false report. And don't put your hand with an evil person to be an aid Hamas. Look at that Hamas, right? A fraudulent witness, a wicked witness, a corrupt witness. Okay, Rashi, should not bear a false report. Kitargumai, this like Unkelis. Kabel Shema Shaker, do not accept a false report. Azhara l'mikabel lashon hara, this is a negative commandment for those who should not accept a malicious report, malicious talk. The dayan and to the judge. In other words, to the person who could be a witness, right? And to the judge. He should not listen to the words of the litigant until the fellow litigant comes to plead his side. Wow, that's interesting. I don't know how he gets it from there. Not clear on that. There's the plaintiff, you don't listen to the plaintiff until the defendant is there, that he can also give his side, right? In other words, that Rashi is explaining, it's called a false report. Okay. So how's the understanding like this? Very simple. If Yankel was there, the plaintiff, and the defendant wasn't there, right? So Yankel is more likely going to tell the false report, right? Because the defendant isn't there. Defendant is there, it's going to be harder for him to tell a false report. So that's how Rashi is explaining it. Don't accept. Like it says, don't accept the false report. So how do you not accept the false report? Make sure that the defendant is there before the plaintiff gives his claim.
Very interesting.
That's how Rashi's taking out from there.
Assuming that it will be a false report if the defendant is not there. It's like assuming that it's going to be a false report.
No, let's understand. We already know that a judge is not allowed to take a false report. So what's the verse telling me so up here? It says, "Midvar sheker tirchak," stay away from a lie. So of course you can't take a false report. That we've learned that already, right? We know that already. So what's it saying over here? It's saying don't make something that will end up being a false report. How's that? You're going to listen to the plaintiff before the defendant is there, right? That's going to help that the plaintiff is not going to make a false report, right? Of course, you're not allowed to accept a false report. That we know already, right? That's not what this verse is coming to say. Otherwise, there's no novelty over here. So that's how Rashi is. Remember, it's all an implication and inference and so on, right? And we have to take into consideration what we know already. We know already that a judge can't do that. So what's this saying over here? It's saying don't create a situation that the plaintiff is going to make a false report. Clear?
Yes.
Yeah? Al tashiz yadcha im rasha. You should not put your hand with an evil person. To make a false claim against a fellow. By promising to be a fraudulent witness for him. Right. Putting your hand with that person means you're an accomplice, right? Aha. Even, so the commentators explain, even if you don't make a fraudulent testimony, the fact that you're going to tell somebody that you will make a fraudulent testimony, that itself is a prohibition. Yeah, is that clear? Because what it's that you are promising him that you're going to, right, what do you mean you're promising? Why are you promising? You went and gave false testimony. Even if you just promised and didn't end up giving the false testimony, that is a prohibition. I'm gonna bear witness, and you don't show up that day to court. The fact that you said that is already a prohibition. That's the point. That's what Rashi is learning over here. Okay, is that clear? Okay. Number 2. You should not go after the many to do bad. And you should not respond over a dispute. Riv is a dispute. Lintois to tilt. Achre rabim lahatois. That you have to dispute to tilt after the many. Okay, what is this talking about? So far, what are we talking? What's the reference point over here that we're talking about? We're talking about judges in a court, right? We're not talking, right? I mean, okay, the last part was, no, it wasn't. That you shouldn't be, right? But let's bear that in mind, okay? Okay, number 2. You should not go after the many to do bad. So obviously, you should follow, this is the SS and all the officers in the army, in the German army, right? They said, well, we got the orders, so we did it. This is what we're told to do. So, we're not, no, don't go after, but this is not what it means, right? That's what you would think it might mean. Don't go after the majority just because they're doing bad, right?
Okay,
yes. So this is interpreted by the sages in the following. But the language doesn't fit in the context, as he says, It doesn't fit in exactly. Umikan darshu. From here they derive in the first part of the verse. She'ein matim lechoiva. That the judges do not arrive at a verdict which is a detriment to the defendant. Ba'achraz dayan echad, by the majority of only one judge. Right. In other words, don't go after. This is look. Listen what he's saying. Don't go after the majority to do evil. Meaning, the judges are judging a case, and this will be evil to the defendant or to the defendant, right? In other words, what would be evil? He's going to get death sentence. We'll see. Okay. Don't go after the majority. In other words, if the court was 36 to 35, that's a majority, right?
Not enough.
Right. That's right. Soifa mikra darshu. So they expound at the end of the verse as follows: Achre rabin lehatois. You tilt after the many. That should be understood. She'im yeshnaim shemechayim alamizakim. That if there are two more judges who opt to convict more than who acquit, hate hadin al piyem lechoiva. Then you will make a verdict against that person. And we're speaking here about capital cases. So the end of the verse is proving what the beginning of the verse. This is what the sages in the Talmud, they understand, right? That you should, that in a dispute, lintois acher rabim lahatos, after the majority, you tilt the dispute. How do they take that? One second. Okay, we have to finish the whole thing over here to get proper clarity over here. So, again, the first part of the verse is speaking about a majority to do evil, and the response of the defendant's question regarding your stance in this case, that you may not stray from the truth and follow the incorrect majority view, thereby perverting justice. Rabim lahatois, to make a perverted justice. In other words, you can't follow the majority because that will be a perverted justice. So what do you have to do? It has to be a majority of two. That's how the sages learn out from here. It's a very right, and it's only speaking about capital offense, right? In the middle of the verse, they explain that you shall not respond over a dispute, and do not respond against a master. The word riv, which means a dispute, also means rav, master. If you don't put the vowels. Meaning you don't argue against the most outstanding member in the court. Therefore, when it comes to capital cases, when you're polling the judges you do it from the side. In other words, from the less ranking ones, you ask them first for their opinion. Wow. So the last part of the verse is explaining the first part of the verse, and the middle of the verse is explaining that you should not dispute. You should not dispute. The word riv means dispute, but without this also means the master rabbi. Don't dispute with him. So how do you not dispute with him? If he's going to give his opinion, that means what? That means what's the point of having based on 71 people, right? Means start with the least of them and he gives his opinion last. So that way, no one's disputing him because you don't know what his opinion was, right? It doesn't mean you don't give your opinion, obviously, because if you have a court of 71, they're not there just to be yes men, right? So they have to give their opinion, right? And how do we know that? Because when it comes to capital offense, don't go after the majority of one. That means everybody had to give their opinion, not just one person. But he's got his opinion, and you can't dispute his opinion because he's got to go last. That's what's all learned out from those words.
Would 71 judges sit for a capital offense? They would
It could be 35.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it can't be less than 35. No, 23. Sorry, what did I say? 35. 23.
And 3 would be for minimal situations.
3 would be just a dispute of financial dispute. But for capital offense has to be minimum 23.
Today it's only one judge. Today, in this court system.
Yeah.
Only one.
And according to the words of our rabbis, mikra. So this is what first explanation he gave. Now let's go further. Wow, fascinating. This is how they explain it. Don't go after the many to do bad. To impose the death penalty on the basis of one judge by whom you convict and outnumber those who acquit. And he shall not respond against the master, to veering of his words, because the word reeve is spelled without a yud. That's why they interpret it that way. Oh, I'm sorry. This is according to what we explained earlier. He's just, I don't know why he's explaining it again here. You tilt after the many means there's a majority whom you tilt the verdict, whose verdict is accepted. When is that? At the time when there's at least 2 more judges and then who decide to convict over those who opt to acquit. It says, they should not go after the many to do bad. But what's the inference from there? That I understand from that for good, Mikan Omru, from here they said, that to acquit somebody, it's enough to have a majority of one. To obligate somebody, to make them liable for the death sentence, you have to majority of 2. That's the inference. Now, for bad, don't tilt majority. Don't go with the majority. But for good, meaning that they're not liable, then you go with the majority of 1. You need at least a majority of 2 to convict a person. And Onkelos understands this. Aldina. And Onkelos, he explains, do not refrain from teaching what is asked you with regarding a judgment. The Hebrew text and the verse is interpreted according to the Targum as follows. You should not respond regarding a dispute by turning away. If a person asks you a matter of a judgment, do not answer by turning away to one side or another side, okay? In order to remove him from dispute, but judge a person in the matter of truth, give an honest verdict. I'm not exactly clear on that, But I say, opposed to the sage. So now Rashi brought the sages, and remember he said it doesn't really fit in with the simple meaning so easily, right? And Unkeles, he opposes both, and he now gives his explanation. The Yashval Alifan of the Kipshute. What's the proper understanding according to simple meaning? Kach Bisreine. This is what it means. Do not go after the many to do bad, which means if you see wicked people who are perverting justice, don't say, since there are many, I will then follow them. Right? In other words, you see judges that are corrupt. Okay, guess what? All right, I'll also be corrupt. That's how Rashi's learning the simple meaning of this verse. Right? Don't do that, right? Since there are many, and then the second part of the verse is, do not respond over a dispute to turn. He explains it, Rashi, the Mishpat, if a defendant asks you about the perverted judgment, do not respond to him regarding the dispute with something that follows the wicked multitude. To turn away the judgment from its truth. Ella, Emor ala mishpat kasher, but rather state your opinion, right, on the judgment as it is truthfully to you. And let the chain of responsibility of the false judgment hang on the neck of the wicked majority. In other words, the majority is going with this, and I'm a judge in this case, right? So you might say, listen, what am I going to do over here, right? You know what? You do what's the truth. Okay, we're almost finished. Let's go. Whoa, we're almost making it today. Wow. You should not glorify a destitute person in his dispute. Rashi, number 3, do not glorify him. Don't give him honor, meaning deciding his case in favor. Oh, he's destitute, so therefore I'm going to decide, Torah is saying, don't be woke. Right? That I will decide in his favor and thereby honor him. Right? I mean, he's down and out, the compassion, so let's have compassion. No. You got to judge according to the rule of law. That you should not encounter an ox of your enemy. Or chamay, right? Enemy here doesn't mean Hamas. Enemy means your fellow Jew who you're in synagogue today and you had a dispute with him. Right? You had a dispute with him and you're not a chassid. Because if you're a chassid, immediately you're over it. If you're not a chassid, then by Kriya Shema Lamita you get over it. You have to wait that long by your prayer at night. The first prayer we say before we go to sleep, right? Mm-hmm. Anybody that vexed me, angered me, and so on, right? That's a non-chassid had to wait till then. A chassid, totally gone. Okay, encounter an ox of your enemy, or his donkey, it's wandering, you shall surely return it to him. Verse number 5. When you will see your enemy's donkey, it is lying under a heavy load, and you're going to refrain from helping him. You shall surely help him. Rashi, number 5. Again, this is a fellow Jew. It's not speaking about someone who's not Jewish, right? We're talking about obligation here. Obviously, you can help somebody, right? We're not talking about that. We're talking about an obligation. That's what the verse is telling us. You see, when you're going to see the donkey of your friend that you hate, here the key means perhaps. The word ki has 4 meanings to it. And here the explanation is perhaps you're going to see the donkey lying under a heavy burden, and you refrain from helping him. In other words, a language of astonishment, right? Of a question. You surely will help him. Aziva here means that you're going to help him. Aziv kind of means like to let him go. That means, that saved and help. And just bringing examples in Yerushalayim Alachayma, that you fortified the city, the wall, Meloya Afar, he's just bringing different examples. Okay, continues, and he says, "Midrash kach darshu Rabbeinu," and this is interpreted by the sages as follows: He said, "When you will see and you will refrain." Right? In other words, when you will see and you will refrain. So, meaning sometimes you will see and you do refrain. That's how our sages take that terminology. There are times that you do refrain, and the times that you must help. Okay, so what does that mean? If it's an elder sage and it's not his dignity to unload the donkey, then he can refrain. He can refrain. Or it's an animal that is of a non-Jew and carrying a burden of a Jew. Torah says you can refrain. Again, you can help. Talking about obligation. You're not obliged. Surely help along with him. The Farakamatse to unload the burden. Shakel that it should refrain from taking for him, and from taking its burden from it. Second. Onkelos. I'm saying this onkelos. He learns it a bit different from taking from him. I don't know what that means exactly. Not certain what that means. But whatever it is, we are finished and we're going to Tanya.